Okay, we're live.
Mm-hmm.
Just to follow up on what Brendan was talking about, when I worked for Raytheon, I had to write a device driver for Linux. It was either Linux or Unix, I don't remember what it was, on a HP workstation.
Right.
And they wouldn't give me root access.
So how are you going to test a device driver? And
Good
was this for
question.
something that couldn't be virtualized?
Not back then.
That was 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And it was an HP owned workstation. Finally, I went up to Raytheon in Sudbury. No, it was Raytheon in, I think it was Raytheon in Sudbury I had to go up to. And play around with it. And they didn't give me root access at all. It wouldn't allow root on that machine. Finally,
if it was a shared machine, that's a problem. But yeah,
no, it was not a shared machine. It was in, it was in a lab. Anyway, long story short, they finally said that you can have root access, but since I was a contractor, you had to have a Raytheon employee sit next to me and watch all my keystrokes.
right.
That was security. It was ridiculous. Now in Raytheon in Bedford, where I was, I did have root access to my machine. That was allowed. But up in Raytheon in
How are you?
Sudbury, I couldn't.
Hello, Mark.
Raytheon Sudbury is now a Whole Foods.
My coworker Emily is concerned about this new rogue laptop policy because she worked for us for a while and she left and she came back, and a month or two after she came back, like 6 months ago, they assigned a subordinate to Emily. Now she's supervising somebody, and she's got a different mindset now, and she's thinking, so what about all the newbie developers? You can give them all the how-tos you want, but they're still going to screw up InfoSec. And without the lockdown policies in place from IT, how is this going to play out? And exactly where is where is it all going to spread when it hits the fan?
Yeah, the problem I can see the problem from an IT standpoint.
Yeah.
Because you got one rogue laptop on the network, and they can mess up a lot of things.
And
but I worked for IBM, and they had no problem with having Linux on my laptop. Actually, when I ordered the laptop, I ordered it with Linux installed.
Mm-hmm.
And then I put Fedora on there. They would put Red Hat on there. I wanted a newer Linux. They had absolutely no problem.
My company
And-
is a government contractor, and we have all kinds
Yep.
of rules in place about we're not too concerned about program source code. We write a lot of software, but it's
Yep.
like the software is not valuable except that we use it to solve our problems.
Right.
What we are concerned about is any project production data has to live in the cloud, in the controlled centralized servers that
Yep.
are monitored by project staff. And if you're doing any work on your local machine, you're using the code, but you're not copying the data down. Now, of course, Emily's concern is how do we know that A, the newbie developers won't actually do that, and B, if they do, how secure is their machine? And I just said, let's, Emily and I, why don't we have a chat on Friday in the future? I said, I asked her about it, and we got it on the calendar. I'm going to talk to her about why don't we go to Dave, whose idea it was to do this whole thing with the laptops, Emily and I, with a proposal that all the developers that aren't senior should have a buddy assigned to them. And so the buddy is like anything personal IT wise, I'm your consultant. I want to know what you're doing. I want to help you with it. And once you get your laptop all up and running, let's do a screen sharing and show me what you built. And I wonder if that'll make Emily feel a little bit better about it.
It should make her feel better, and it's a darn good idea anyway for other reasons.
Yeah. I mean,
That'll pay for itself.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, I've had an issue with dialog boxes on Fedora 35. My main laptop is still on 33. But, the laptop I use for testing is on 35. And when I'm in a web browser, a lot of time I want to save an image or something. File dialog comes up, and then I just hit return. But now on 35, that doesn't work. I have to take the mouse out of the dialog box and then back into it to get the focus. For some reason, the focus doesn't shift the dialog box when it opens. And that did not happen in Fedora 33, but it is happening in 35. And I've been Googling, trying to find out what's going on. I'm not getting any luck on resolving the issue. Has anyone else experienced that and know how to fix it?
what OS is that?
Fedora
What distro?
35?
Fedora? Using virtual?
What?
Is that virtual?
Yep. In Firefox and in Brave.
Okay.
Probably happen in pretty much everything. I don't use the test laptop that much, but when I do, it gets really frustrating.
I have this big pile of notes from the course, but I'm not sure they'd be very helpful. I was thinking that.
Oh,
Yeah,
you mean a VM? No, it's not a VM. It's on a laptop.
Okay. But is it local on the laptop, or are you using the screen on your desktop?
Look on the laptop.
So you're saying what happens is the focus doesn't come up on all the dialog boxes?
Right.
I don't know.
No.
I guess one advantage of the automatic background replacement on anything that doesn't act live is that the HD camera might not let you read the barcode on my Zeltzer.
Live streaming is on.
Yeah, Bill, we're not hearing you.
Is that you'd like to speak?
No, I just tested the raise hand feature.
Oh, okay.
That's
Okay.
all.
Okay, 2 minutes to go.
And Ben Scott just did also. Hi, Ben.
Start over briefly.
And John did also.
Down again.
Yep. Everybody test.
We have it on at the same time. And the participants that just briefly showed up and then disappeared. Down again. Yeah, it's staying up. I don't know why it just disappeared. Oh, it disappeared again. That's weird.
I turned off the sound effects and I'm still hearing them.
Yeah.
Again.
Boing, ding, boing.
Does anybody know somebody that has their phone configured to make noise or vibrate when like anything happens on the internet where they're mentioned, and then the phone will make noise? I remember I had a coworker years ago who had a BlackBerry that would make noise every time he got an email, and he got a lot of emails.
Yep.
And I could not live with that. First thing I do when I get a new phone is turn off everything and then turn on the notifications I need, which is very little.
I remember back when Windows 95 came out, I set it up so that every event caused a clip from Monty Python to play.
You weren't the only one. But if you're on social media and your social media clients are asking for attention when you don't have them open, you're doing it wrong, in my opinion.
Well, it's past 7. I guess we can start now. You want to wait a few more minutes?
And we've got plenty of people on here. So why not?
You mean start main program or something else?
Yeah, start the main program.
All righty. Did I just successfully share a screen?
No, you didn't.
It says a window is being shared.
Going up here.
Your connection is showing red, now yellow.
Yeah, I'm not using Wi-Fi, so I don't know why that would be. Claims I'm going to be able to get 5 screen refreshes a second. Well, let's try the old reconnect. Yes, I remember live streaming is on. There we go. Much better. Okay, our tradition has been to have a PGP key signing in September. And I've been doing a cryptology news and history review as the entertainment before the key signing. We're obviously not key signing during pure virtual meetings in pandemic. And I'm not convinced we'll go back to doing it in the future. Maybe, I don't know. But in the meantime, I enjoy doing the history review, both recent and ancient, and so we continue to do so. I'm using a different technology for slides this year. This is Slidey, one of several JavaScript libraries that lets you have slides in a single HTML file for the whole presentation, generated with Pandoc from Markdown, so I can have both a long document of notes and the slides. So that's what I'm doing. Interesting topics of cryptographic security, not general security, from the last year. There was a problem nearly a year ago with some stale old certificate authority root certs that were problematic. Hopefully that's been fixed by now. Got to keep an eye on those root certificates. We all remember, I hope, ROT 13. Well, the Unicode equivalent of ROT 13 is ROT 8000. That's a hex number. And that's steganographic as well as encrypting. However, you got to do it carefully so that you can't just do it with a TR command at the command line. Oh well. Yet another example of why PGP isn't fit for purpose. The German Ministry of Information Security sent one of its private keys when somebody asked, can you send me your public key so that I can decrypt your message? If even they mess up, maybe it's a solution in search of a problem. the news feature for this year. What is this quantum cryptography that the government is and all of the wags are talking about? Well, it's cryptography that allows for quantum computing. What's quantum computing? Well, that's when you have bits that can be in a superposition state. Schrodinger's cat may be alive and there or not there. There is quantum hardware available for purchase today, and you can hear some amazing statistics for the number of quantum bits available from the manufacturers of the quantum annealing hardware, which is great for traveling salesman problem. Can solve those using non-determinism in short time. But the quantum circuits or quantum logic that's required for algorithms that are relevant to cryptology are shipping in much smaller numbers of qubits still. These would theoretically allow for non-deterministic parallelism to evade the classical performance limits, particularly on factoring large numbers, but also the other key public key sorts of algorithms, pardon the pun. Yes, we're discussing post-quantum cryptography before we discuss quantum cryptography. Quantum cryptography mostly doesn't exist yet and would be using the quantum logic or quantum hardware to do the cryptography. The Chinese Space Agency claims they've entangled bits between their space station and the ground station, so they claim to have done 1 bit worth of quantum cryptography. Okay, maybe. For quantum cryptanalysis, that's when you're using quantum hardware to do fast factoring of the RSA primes or whatever to crack a classical encryption, usually being the public key infrastructure key exchange, because quantum doesn't help you much with cracking a like AES or old DES symmetric encryption. So when we say post-quantum cryptography, the parentheses go around post-quantum. We're looking at cryptography that can survive your opponent having a big quantum computer. We're talking about survivability, not needing quantum hardware to do your encryption, because you don't want to pay for that. Although Google and Microsoft both have quantum hardware available in their cloud for rent. But, you know, renting a slice of a very expensive machine to factor the number 15 doesn't seem like a good purchase to me. Now, the problem is there are several algorithms that theoretically could be used to do discrete log or break elliptic curves, which is basically a discrete log problem, or prime factoring. Prime factoring and discrete log are sort of interchangeable algorithmically. Pretty much every unbreakable cipher, actually, at least partially all unbreakable ciphers have been broken. Previous years I've discussed how the NSA broke Russian and German use of the perfect unbreakable cipher because they did it badly. If you perfectly unbreakable ciphers are only perfectly unbreakable if the humans using them are perfect. And as we demonstrated with PGP a couple slides back, users aren't perfect. Similar to Emily's laptop problem. So the 20th century RSA and other public key infrastructure algorithms are just not guaranteed against a major breakthrough in number theory or quantum hardware that provides a technological shortcut to doing the number theoretic problems like factoring and discrete log. Shor's algorithm is the classic algorithm that's hypothesized as being used for this on the quantum hardware, but Grover's and variational quantum factoring VQF seem to be more practical in baby trials. So that may be where the real future is, but Shor's has been the stalking horse for ages. So is this a problem for us today when the hardware is just being able to factor 15 or 240 something? Well, yes. We discussed forward secrecy as old messages not being broken if you lose the host key later, because there's enough randomness added in the key exchange that recording the key exchange doesn't let you figure out what the key was just by getting one of the two host keys. Well, a generalization of forward secrecy would be old messages can't be broken by other kinds of breakthroughs like quantum actually becoming workable in, say, the year 2030. NSA did this to the Russians. As I mentioned, their perfect cipher was broken when NSA collected enough messages that they could tell when don't ever reuse these keys one-time pad messages, the pads were actually reused. They compared lots and lots of data and with computers and found, well, IBM card accounting machines, and found the duplicates and broke the unbreakable code by data hoarding. Well, instead of listening on the radio for Morse code messages to write down and keep forever, now they're listening on the internet and recording encrypted messages in their Utah data farm and saving it forever. Once they get a big enough quantum computer, they're probably going to put it next to this Utah data farm. So if you have something you want to hide from the NSA 10 years from now, when somebody whose politics you've been mouthing off about today is in power, yeah, maybe you do want it to not be breakable in 2030. No matter who you think the fascists are, if the fascists get control of the horde of old messages and quantum computing, things we said bad about them today will be, while encrypted, will be readable in 2030. And some of us, expect to be alive then. So, yes, there is a desire to have a system that will work in the even when quantum is realistic, if it ever. I mean, it's not guaranteed this is going to work. That's right. Do you want to say something, Ben? Your mic's on.
Yeah. Are you saying that the current practices on perfect forward secrecy are expected to be vulnerable to quantum security, or that?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Well, that's
current
great.
forward secrecy protects you in case your personal keying material is later disclosed. So that like that German ministry's key was exposed, their old messages, if they were using perfect forward secrecy versions of PGP, their old messages may not be broken, but their signature can now be forged. And so they're going to have to discard the key, and their signature is no longer validatable on their old messages, but their old messages aren't disclosed because the key wasn't actually used to encrypt the message. It was used to negotiate the symmetric key that the message was encrypting. But their signatures are broken. And the current forward secrecy methods may be adequate in the sense that the RSA and the like are being used to negotiate the session key, same as in current forward secrecy, but our signing ability, our verification ability, and spoof ability, it all falls apart if it becomes trivial to break an RSA key. So even if forward secrecy technically still works, it all falls down. So making factoring RSA certificates cheap, where this hardware ain't cheap, but if it works, it's going to be well within NSA's budget and any Fortune 500's budget. And I'm not willing to bet that the NSA, the FSGB, the People's Republic, and those dodgy guys in Korea, and all of the Fortune 500s all have my best interests at heart. At least one of those 505 organizations that can afford this sort of data center are going to be hostile to my interests, even if they don't know I exist. They're all data mining us all already. So it's this may not be in your threat model, but in dystopian plausible futures, it ought to be. So the National Bureau of Standards, or rather NIST, the artist formerly known as National Bureau of Standards, has been doing competitions for new standards, which is a good thing because they got caught cooperating a little too much with the NSA and not enough with academia previously. So openness and transparency is good. This is, I think, the third round of the third standard done under open academic competition. AES and SHA-3 being the previous. And seems to have worked fairly well. When you get the online version, you'll be able to see the National Institute announcement and Q&A and commentary from Bruce Schnarr, my favorite commentator on these sorts of matters. I'll make my window just a little bigger for you. There we go. Come on. Fit in the screen, damn it. There we go. So they're into the fourth round. They have nominated several winners that can move forward toward draft standards already. There's one suite that covers both oh, darn it. Thank you. I have to keep moving if I want to select something. The Crystal suite covers both the PKI key exchange mechanism and signature, which, like like RSA. You can use RSA for both key exchange and signing. And the dilithium portion of crystals, dilithium crystals, get it? Uses the previous competition SHA-3 algorithm for its signatures. And then 2 other variants for signature or moving towards standardization. And then several more key exchange algorithms have been moved to round 4 for further competition and research. McAleese is actually a very old comparatively speaking, classical encryption algorithm that appears to be post-quantum sound despite not being designed for that criteria. Mere weeks into round 4, this summer, candidate Psych was broken. How badly was it broken? 1 x86-64 core hour to break. That's like trivial effort to break. That is terrible. It is out of the competition. But this is why pitting the best open source community cryptographers against each other, each of the 69 proposers, which are teams, groups, collaborations, they act as the peer reviewers for all the others and apply their cryptanalytics skills, their devious hacker minds, to trying to break all of the competitors, as well as trying to break their own for, honesty. And yeah, it's a thing. It's done well. These are rolling forward. Google and Microsoft are funding implementations, some of which are working in the open source community. There's a PQC fork of OpenSSL, Open Quantum Safe, OQS. DigiCert is involved with Google. Google has the Boring SSL, which I'm not sure if it's a fork that's been pared back to just the essentials or if it's a complete reimplementation. And German feds are funding getting the Kyber signature system included in a future release of Thunderbird email client. So this is, either next year or maybe late this year, worst early 2024, we should be seeing implementations. The official 4th conference is end of November. Call for papers October 1st if you want to submit. And this is where they'll discuss the breaking of Psych and what research is being done on the other round 4 candidates and what research is planned. They're targeting either 2022, late this year, or next year, 2023. The feds will have draft standards. And once the draft standards are undrafted and made full standards in 2024, federal information processing will allow post-quantum cryptography. So in federal systems, you won't even be allowed to use these new implementations until 2024 after there are standards, which is, kind of sad. And sometime in 2025, 2026, the individual implementations will be certified, at which point those of you doing Fed work will be able to say you're using FIPS-approved algorithm implementations. The rest of us will have unapproved implementations well before that. So, if you're willing to use a fork of OpenSSL, you're going to be able to turn this on probably next year. Now, this is aside from McAleese, this is all new terrain. New algorithms invented for the purpose, which means most of them are going to be imperfect and breakable by another smart person. So far, 62 of the 69 entrants have been broken, including 2 that were considered front runners just before they were broken. And one of the remaining 7 has what I would consider a fairly strong weakness. Well, maybe I don't want to say it quite like one of the fairly significant weakness. Falcon would be compromised if you reuse a salt or fail to salt, as repeating the same key and hash ever gives too much information, and the whole thing can be unwound. And you might think this is unlikely, but back in 2014, I think it was, Debian broke the system entropy randomness, and lots of people got identical SSH keys created, or keys that were at least half identical, sharing one of the 2 primes. All of those keys had to be canceled and were being refused by servers that had been updated. This was somewhat traumatic. So lack of random, yes, random return 4, exactly. And Ben Scott has a good comment in the chat. By standards of FIPS adoption, that's above average speed for adoption. Yes. Yes. It was 1980 that I was annoyed that FIPS was requiring me to use only approved compilers, and they hadn't approved a Fortran 77 yet. So I had to use a structured preprocessor for Fortran instead of being able to use Fortran 77 in 1980-81. Yeah, FIPS. So yeah, not unhappy to be outside of that community. And we'll be discussing in our historical vignette the problems of reusing keys in World War II. So yeah, reuse of your randomness, your keys, is a recurring problem in cryptography, and one that designers keep thinking the users can engineer around, work around, and not mess up. And well, users are very clever. They find new ways to mess up, and that's just how it is. So I'm leery of Falcon. I don't know anything bad about any of the others. So the historical vignette. You might have wondered what that thing behind my head was in the virtual background. That's the insides of a US Model 209 Hagelin cryptograph of the C38 design. Recently, I guess a year ago, Bletchley Park podcast did an analysis more of the impact, but also somewhat how they did it with not Enigma, but with the Hagelin C38, and not the Germans, but the Italian Navy. And from the Ultrabooks, people think it was the Enigma messages that were used to interdict Rommel's shipping pipeline of supply to North Africa, but it was actually the Hagelin machines that Bletchley Park, Britain's code breakers, were reading that was letting them interdict those convoys. So this is the picture you saw over my shoulder. That's the inside of one of these machines. Boris, multiple middle initials, Hagelin, was son of a Nobel employee and was obviously a bright lad. So the founder of the Nobel Prize put him in as his personal representative in a at that time it was Swedish, maybe it became Swiss later, Swedish cryptography company he'd invested in that was trying to compete with Enigma. And he switched their machines from being rotor-based like Enigma to using adding machine internals. And let's see, can I open this? Yes. And you can see my cursor. So this drum here with bars on it is like the accumulator in a 1920s, 1930s adding machine, except that instead of adding separate columns of numbers, it's using these little lugs that are slid along the bars to multiply a 1 or a 0 sensed on each of these wheels by the number of lugs. And the sum of those multiples gets turned into a variable gear when these bars slide 3 millimeters to the left, having been kicked by the actuator arm. You get 0 to 26 teeth around the end of this cage, which will turn the gear here to turn the gear here to move the ciphertext alphabet that's covered with ink here forward 0 to 27 spaces forward, or rather backwards, because forwards is backwards on a reversed alphabet, under control of all 6 wheels, which, using these, do you see the pin that's sticking out from the K here? There's a little pin sticking out to the left. That's the inactive position. If it's pushed through such that it's flush on this side, like it is at the L, it'll be sticking out on the other side, where it will engage a lever we can't see here, which whacks the lug to slide this to the left as this cage rolls past these and does the addition. This is different from the way the parts are arranged in a 1920s, 1930s adding machine, but all fairly standard individual components in terms of using repeated addition to do multiplication, using a cage, and levers to communicate. Another difference here from an Enigma type machine is these wheels are not geared like an odometer. All the wheels will turn simultaneously one step each time the actuating lever is pushed at the end of the cycle, after one plain text letter and one ciphertext letter have been printed on the slips of paper. This one appears to have only one printing head, so it doesn't print both at once. Some slightly larger ones print 2 tapes. So these will all turn one step, and what throws them out of step with each other is they have different numbers of stops on each wheel. These are slightly different diameters. I think the left one here is the smallest with 17 around, so it doesn't get the Z. It doesn't get much. No, I think it's the other way around. This one has more gaps between, so I think this is the 17. So anyway, it's 17, 19, 21, 23, and 25. So there's none of these wheels have, well, and the 26 wheel as well on this one. The previous model didn't have a 26 position wheel, but this one does. Convention here is that the letter Z or Z prints as space when you're decrypting, making plain text, but you enter a space as a Z when enciphering. There is no reserve punctuation symbol, it's just Z, and whatever Z encrypts to. The French liked the desktop machine that was built on this principle called the B series and requested in 1935 that Hagelin and Company make a pocketable tactical device, and it was upgraded in the 1938 model to have 6 wheels like the one we saw there. The olive drab one there is the US Model 209, built under license from Hagelin by the Smith Corona Typewriter Company, who would later buy an adding machine company, Marchand, but they weren't an adding machine company at this time. The U.S. Navy called it CSP 1500. Many militaries in World War II had C-38 variants. For instance, the Italian Navy called it the C-38M, M for Marina Navy. And since they use Z in Italian, but don't use the letter K, their model is modified so that K prints as a space in clear, and so you encipher spaces and punctuation as a K. So the key space on your the key space on your internal settings is how you set the lugs on the cage and how you set the pins on the wheels. There's a rather large number. There's the pin settings is 2 raised to the 131 power, because there are 131 different pins you could set on these wheels. That's the sum of the size of the wheels. So the internal key size is, impressive, but as we've learned from looking at Enigma and other things, brute force isn't how you want to attack anything anyway. But using addition and multiplication, and effectively this is mechanically implemented addition, multiplication, AND gates and OR gates in the mechanical mechanism. It's kind of impressive when looked at as how much computation is being done in this small little box. Many books get it correct that it was Hagelin messages that Bletchley Park was cracking to block the Africa Corps supply convoys, but some books will tell you that it was Ultra and therefore Enigma. Well, it wasn't even Ultra. That's the code word for Bletchley Park intelligence sent to the British or American Army, which were fighting together. if it was sent to the Royal Navy, it was Z teleprinted Italian, Z being the cover name for Hagelin cracks, T because we're putting it on the encrypted teleprinter network, and I or G indicating if it's from the Italian Navy or the German Navy or their air forces, which are of interest to the navies. You may have noticed Supermarina in the title of the podcast. That's Italian for Navy headquarters. Super as in supervisory or over. And marina not as in a bunch of little boats on a dock, but as in the Regia Marina is the Royal Navy. Yeah, I know my Italian accent's horrible. That's okay. So Navy HQ, for some reason, chose to use a tactical cipher machine to send messages domestically on the radio to headquarters of several harbors that were making up convoys, telling them who to assign to each convoy going where. Well, first of all, they should have been putting this on landline teleprinters and not on radio. Second, they should have been using a stronger cryptograph. If they had the latest model Enigmas from Germany, that would have been a better choice. They probably thought that since the Hagelin was a newer design, it was stronger. Well, it wasn't. The Italians did understand that sending even one very long message, there was a, stop that. One very long message allows a purely statistical attack. They might not have understood that several medium-long messages might allow the same thing. They did understand that sending two messages that used overlapping key sequences could cause a problem, so they forbid overlapping at all by mandating starting at offsets of the mandated maximum message length. This wasn't perhaps ideal. It was an idea. Bletchley Park had several ways of breaking this. They weren't the only ones to break it, by the way. If there were errors causing retransmission of messages with the same key, that was a quick entry. Two messages accidentally sent with the same key with different contents could also be solved as a depth. Breaking the depths was frequently done using a crib. They had a tendency to start their messages with the equivalent of 2 colon, just like our emails. Well, in Italian, 2 is per, P-E-R, with a K for space. That gets you a 4-letter crib of perk. If it's a reply from harbor to headquarters, it's going to be perk supermarine perk or supermarine up perk. That gets you a really nice, let's see if this works. And we use the bridge term cross riff.
Live streaming is on.
Now, the way you tell if you found the crib in a depth is, since the two messages were enciphered by the same key, if you add them to each other or subtract them, as the case may be, you cancel the key and you have one message enciphered with the other message as key. So if you try your crib, you should get clear text coming out as the out the other side, and that tells you found it. And then you look to complete the partial word at the end of that text, and that goes back through the encryption and tells you what the beginning of the next word on the first message is, and you just zigzag between the two like you're growing a crossword puzzle or working between hand and dummy, playing out a bridge hand. This gives you fragments of both messages and their shared key. From a long enough fragment of the key, you can work out the internal pin positions and lug multipliers and the start position for the message, at which point you can read the whole message. And you now know the internal settings of the day or month, depending how often they're updating them. And with 131 pins to set, you're not doing it every 4 hours like maybe you should. They were doing it monthly. Once you find that, it's going to be easy to break messages the rest of the month. Cribs were not quite as easy as on Enigma. Enigma had the flaw that a letter could never represent itself in the Enigma cipher. So you could drag a crib along and see if any letters matched between the crib and the guessed plain text. And a long enough crib would only have a couple of false matches along with the one good match. That trick isn't workable on the Hagelin because an E can encrypt to an E on a Hagelin. So it avoided that problem. So the Italian system of picking starting positions and the indicators to use with them should have been secure if it had been used correctly, but see the previous discussion about users using things correctly. So who broke it? This is the same Bill Tutt, Tommy Flowers, and the Dollis Hill Post Office research gang that did a number of the special crazy machines like Colossus and Heath Robinson at Bletchley Park, and even added some features to the Polish Turing bombas. Bill Tutt was the research section Bletchley Park person that figured out the manual depth breaking technique and advised on the deeper breaking hardware problem. Tommy Flowers was lead designer. Sidney Broadhurst, there's a third name listed on Wikipedia whose name I forget. Of course, this work was highly classified until quite recently. So Bill Tutt was basically known for his teaching in Canada after the war, and only that. Tommy Flowers and Sidney Broadhurst are remembered by the public for building the electronic randomizer for the first post office premium bond lottery, where in addition to your paltry savings bond interest income during the Depression after the war that they had in England, they had depressions before and after the war. They didn't have the boom we had in the late 40s, early 50s. That they would have a lottery prize for one of the bondholders every 3 months would get a nice big bonus payment, which was an incentive to invest in the bonds. And they built this big electronic randomizer, basically a special purpose digital computer using valves and relays and noise diode tubes to make guaranteed random numbers to pick numbers of bonds that had actually been sold to be the winners. And the post office is responsible for a lot of things in England that it isn't here. The post office ran the telephone system, ran the telegraph system. In much of the world, telegraphy and telegrams were part of the post office. And so that's how this technology was built in the post office for their savings bonds. And that's what the public knew Tommy and Sydney for. Engineers knew the two of them for building an all-electronic telephone exchange, which was put into service 3 years before AT&T did the equivalent, which of course was a prerequisite to go to touchtone. But this was initially doing electronic switching of pulse-dialed connections, but extendable to touchtone. And a portrait of Bill Tutt. So the machine that Flowers and Broadhurst designed to solve this problem was codenamed Nightingale. Not a lot is known because it's still mostly classified. It at least was an emulator that would run much faster than a mechanical machine like the adding machine I showed you the guts of to test and do production decryption of intercepted messages. So I'm guessing it probably had punched paper tape inputs and outputs. But it may very well have had a keyboard as well, because Bletchley Park Trust comments that one of the wartime operator gals remembered that operating it was like playing a church organ, which sounds to me like it had both a keyboard and a whole bunch of mode switches, function switches. It is variously stated that it had functions in addition to just simple encryption, decryption faster than a mechanical duplicate. There are no known photographs. There is one suspected photograph. The archives have a photo of a unit that appears to be 10-foot high, multiple telephone company rack units that has a repetition of 6 clusters of mechanism on it. That would be what I would expect it to look like, but we don't know if that's what it is. So it likely had, it's known it had some additional cryptanalytic support functions. That much has been stated. It does, but we don't know if it was statistical analysis or crib dragging or insertion, automatically checking a crib and the month's internal settings against possible start positions once you'd set the monthly internal settings. Something like that would be its additional functions, but beyond that would be speculative. We can hope that more things will be unclassified over time. So how was it built? Before the all electronic exchange and after they stopped using Mabel plug cables to put through phone calls. The exchanges in the phone system were using things called uniselectors or stepper switches, also known as stepper relays. These are relays that have more than an off and an on position. They cycle through a cycle of positions every time they're actuated by the electromagnetic coil. They can have 1 to 10 pole commutators that rotate, and from 8 to 26 positions. So they're, like all relays, they're described as number of poles, number of throws. And so the first picture here is a 1 pole 26 throw, and down below is a 6 pole 25 throw uniselector. And the Dollis Hill gang had already been using these sorts of devices in making the telephone exchanges. There were automated exchanges as early as the 1920s. So this was very well understood technology. So well understood that the nation of Japan used these stepper switches instead of Enigma type rotors or Hagelin style pinwheels to implement the moving portion of one of their code machines. They used a 8 by 25 stepper relays, not as rotors. The commutator going around was not emulating rotation of a rotor, but it was selecting a position of the ROM wired on the outside of the connections, while a rotor has its ROM wiring tucked inside. A U.S. Army signal security or Special Intelligence Service officer mathematician recognized the purple cipher's regularity implied stepper switches. He couldn't get official permission to buy stepper switches from the phone company supply office, so he used his own cash to buy a half dozen 6-wide steppers to recreate the Japanese machine. He didn't guess what the width was, but it didn't matter, since running 3 or 4 of them in parallel creates the same virtual width. Neither Japan nor America in the purple machine used a stepper that was as wide as the ROM was. It was built up out of either 3 or 4 in parallel. So it's not in any way unique for Dollis Hill to have used telephone company relay parts in building this machine. They'd previously used them in making a fast emulator, not the breaker for Enigma, but the machine they'd use. They could use a Type X British enciphering machine that had been lobotomized to think it was an Enigma to decrypt a message once they had the key, just typing on it and writing down the answer. But if they had the message on tape, they could feed the punch tape into an emulator that used steppers and get printed output on a teletype connected to the machine. and maybe even get it on a tape out, and this was much more efficient. The fact that they'd done this wasn't in the early histories. This was covered up. And they also had an emulator for Sturgeon in addition to the breaker for Tunney. And we have to assume that these were used in the Hagel and Nightingale emulator. And I'm guessing, would have used the 26 position stepper to emulate the rotors and use a fast reset the home function to do the wraparound. So using it in the opposite configuration from the purple machine. But that is strictly speculative. The only evidence we have is that Dollis Hill used steppers in some systems and was using some form of relay logic in this system. The uniselectors were, of course, also used in slower parts of Colossus Tunney. And there was even a strap-on accessory using GPO selectors, General Post Office selectors, to the Bomba that checked a solution, potential solution called a stop, by running through a bunch of combinations on the selectors. And it ran through the selector position so fast, it was nicknamed the machine gun circuit because it sounded rat-a-tat-tat. Now, from intelligence collected after the war, from German prisoners of war, and from raiding German intelligence sites, which is the intelligence equivalent of the Paperclip Project, which collected up Werner von Braun and the other rocket scientists. TICOM collected up what we could of radio intelligence, signals intelligence, decryption from the Germans. And from that, we know they were capable of breaking U.S. traffic using the M209 or CSP 1500 as well. They rarely achieved the 4 hours to break that the U.S. expected and used in its assignment of this to only tactical uses. Only use it in things where the message won't be useful to the enemy in 4 hours, which is the correct way to assign it, unlike the Italian Navy. They reportedly had some custom braking machinery on use for this, so that it wasn't just the accounting machine, tabulating machines that they were known to use, but and there is there are sketches and design discussions of that machine in the TICOM archive that don't make a lot of sense, because they were, I think, provided by a guy who maintained them as opposed to the guy who designed them. So it's not clear exactly what he's talking about. And then it was translated from the German. So, if you've ever looked at a 1930s patent, it's like that, except passed through Google Translate. But it does say that the Germans used their machine for detecting when two messages were in depth because somebody reused or overlapped keys, which is interesting because the US and I believe also the UK had separate machines for detecting coincidences, as opposed to using a special purpose machine having a separate setting. And for your further perusal, when I share these documents with Jabber to put on the website, there'll be a bibliography of where I found this, including the TICOM reports. And there's also some footnotes, which nobody really needs to see now. Let's see. Okay, there are no questions, no raised hands. Floor is open. Unmute yourself if you have questions.
Good presentation.
Yeah, very good.
Thank you. I have fun digging into the history.
Out of curiosity, is there any easy way to take the slideshow and then turn it into a PDF?
The PD, it can't. I don't think I can turn the slideshow into a PDF, but I can turn my speaker's notes into a PDF, and you can have both of them as HTML with supporting side files.
These
well.
slideshow libraries usually have a PDF, printable view built in. If you go to print preview right now, it might be something you can save to PDF.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe.
So whoever wants to do it, you can just save the
Yep.
PDF and send that to Jabber.
Oh no, just send me the original HTML stuff. I'll figure out the PDF stuff myself.
Yeah, you probably want to shift it to landscape. But I don't vouch for that.
I'll worry about it after the fact. The
Yeah.
HTML, fine.
Yeah, I'll have to send you the full directory with the CSS and the images. But yeah,
And put it in a zip file.
exactly. That's anyway, what I've been, if you haven't looked at it, Pandoc is a neat thing.
Oh, is that what you use for this? I thought you used something called Slidey.
Slidey is the JavaScript library. Pandoc is a universal document converter.
Oh, cool.
Pan meaning all. And it's sort of markdown centric. Many of its conversions are bilateral, so that it can try to convert a Microsoft Word docx into Markdown. You may lose something. But if you want to achieve what we originally intended with ROF and TeX and SGML, the ancestor of HTML and XML, was separating content from formatting so that authors could just write their content and then decide later how to format it so you don't get bogged down in formatting while you're authoring. And so you can retarget the same content to other targets. This is the best I've run across. I'm using, and there are theoretically ability to go direct to PDF, but the adjusting the CSS that's used for creating the presentation into something usable for PDF may be a heck of a lot of work. So I don't recommend you try it, Jobber. If I was doing this more often than once a year, I'd want to figure out a workflow to do this. And there are multiple slideshow formats. Reveal is actually fairly well known for this sort of JavaScript full presentation in one HTML file. I tried S5 and Slidey because they seem to be best fit for my use. The Slidey doesn't directly support a speaker's note output the way S5 does. S5 would have put my speaker notes in a synchronized second window, so I wouldn't have had to have kept scrolling my other window myself. But Slidey, Pandoc observes a : notes section in the markdown and suppresses it when creating Slidey. So I just made myself a little file that would make a second version of the document that didn't use Slidey and displayed the notes section in line to make a scrolling HTML that's the whole thing just scrollable, that would perhaps be better for somebody with a screen reader and would also serve as my speaker notes.
Good.
And this is also what I'm using for, let's see, the Reborn Boston Pearlmongers webpage is HTML generated from Markdown. So this is serving static HTML, no dynamic elements, which sort of means there's nothing to hack. And since the Markdown to HTML translation is being done on my machine, before I check it into Git and upload it to GitHub, I will never lose historical content when the service provider cuts me off from free ever again. The Markdown lives on my machine and on GitHub and anywhere else we fork and synchronize, and it's loss proof.
I'd like to actually check out some stuff in Pandoc. You think in addition to the HTML, you could also include all the sources, like the Markdown stuff? I can play around with it and see what the different options do.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, right, I don't have a top level. I experimented with the Markdown and GitHub IO serving with my personal web articles being served out of GitHub. And it's gives me enough, gives me just enough control. Let's see. Where's the raw? There's the markdown that creates this page, which is the preview that we saw over on the other site. It's whole thing's pretty slick.
Bulletproof, and must feel pretty confident that this is going to, that like Trump is screwed. And as a lawyer,
Somebody's got background conversation. I had some. I don't know why I did that on the other one. Oh, that's because I didn't use Slidey on that one. Yeah, all right. You'll get the supporting shell commands and markdown in the zip. Be harder to not give them to you, Jabber.
Okay, sounds good.
Given that you're going to publish the resulting documents, I don't feel the need to put them up on my own article tree. But my presentation for Natick went up there, and I'd put it there if you weren't putting it up. But makes sense to keep everything together. Having Blue serve the attachments to the meeting logs makes it survivable.
Right. One of the issues in the past that I had a lot of problems with was when I'd go back like 5 or 10 years for some old meeting, and then all the links were dead.
Yep.
Really wanted to preserve it.
Yeah, I mean, even if the original presenter reposts it at their new website, the URL is moved, but frequently old content isn't maintained when websites are refurbed, and it's really frustrating. If you're lucky, you can replace the 404 archival link with an archive.org historical link, but some things never got scraped.
Actually, maybe I could specifically add them to the Internet Archive. When it's happened.
Oh yes, I mean you can specifically request Internet Archive to scrape us. That's a good thing. You can ask the Wayback Machine to save specific pages. Just have to make sure that the robots.txt file doesn't block them.
Submit it, check it a couple days later, see if it's okay. And I still want a local copy in case the Internet Archive someday goes down.
Yeah. All right.
Trying to sue them for all sorts of nonsensical reasons.
Yeah. And the best insurance there is to donate and make sure your Congress critters know that they should be supporting Internet Archive, but not relying on them entirely and keeping copies of things we care about elsewhere is also good. Absolutely.
The past few years, I've been throwing them $100 every December.
Yep.
They do their drives.
Yep, they're good people. Questions?
Thank you, Bill. I thought it was a good presentation.
Yeah, thanks, Bill.
Entirely welcome. Brian, go ahead and unmute yourself. Maybe Brian was trying to clap and hit the raise hand button instead.
We have a meeting booked for October, but we could use ideas for what to do for November and December. Now, Richard Prairie mentioned that he got a Steam Deck.
He already said no.
Well, that doesn't mean we can't do a Steam Deck topic. We can find one of the developers.
Yeah.
But at least
That looks
looks
like a neat piece of kit.
definitely I could talk on that. Does anyone know how to track down the developers for it? Any ideas who we might invite to talk about it? I'll take the silence as a no. Any other thoughts about topics we could do for November and December?
I'd love to see a Steam Deck presentation. I don't know anybody who has them other than Richard.
I'm trying to avoid the temptation.
I took a look at it. I could never afford it anyway. So it's not really. If nobody has anything else to say, I guess we may as well shut down the meeting now. Good night, everyone.